All right. Hello. I am back. And again, I don't know. I see that there are some people out there listening, and thank you for that. And I hope that you're getting something out of it. Again, I am no scholar. So it's really just me, kind of practicing through it and whatnot. But I am here. I am with Craig, the handy dandy recording bot in the Meditation Mind Discord server, which I genuinely am grateful for. And yeah, going to pick up where we left off. And we are deep in the Sangha. Wow, Freudian slip. Yes, I am in need of a Sangha and looking forward to leaning into that. But that is not what I meant to say. What I meant to say was we are deep into the suttas. I've heard it both ways, so forgive me if I'm getting that wrong. And we're at the end of chapter 2, and we left off on page 91. And I'm just going to pick it up right there at the bottom of 91 with Sutta 35. Monks, this is the forerunner, the harbinger of the rising of the sun, i.e. dawn rise. In the same way, this is the forerunner, the harbinger of the arising of the Noble Eightfold Path in a monk, i.e. admirable friendship. It can be expected of a monk who has an admirable friend that he will develop the Noble Eightfold Path, that he will pursue the Noble Eightfold Path. Monks, this is the forerunner, is it harbinger or harbinger? One of those two, of the rising of the sun, i.e. dawn rise. In the same way, this is the forerunner, the harbinger of the arising of the Noble Eightfold Path in a monk, i.e. virtue, consummation, desire, consummation, self, consummation. According to the commentary, this means being consummate in the training of the mind. Okay, thank you so much. View consummation, heedfulness consummation, appropriate attention. It can be expected of a monk who has appropriate attention that he will develop the Noble Eightfold Path, that he will pursue the Noble Eightfold Path. And that's SN 45, 56 to 62. Wow, this is very, again, I say this frequently, but there's something in Buddhist tone here. And again, I realize this is an English translation, but nevertheless, I'm going to work with what's in front of me here. And I really appreciate, there's kind of a very practical, pragmatic, no nonsense, not non-hyperbolic, kind of look, this is, here, you want to have some liberation, you want to experience some unbinding, do this. But there's also just radical optimism. He's very clear here, as he is in many other places. Look, there's a forerunner. Number one, an admirable friend. As I was just mentioning, I don't have an admirable friend via a Buddhist definition in my life at the moment. Thus the little slip on Sangha. And it's really interesting because there's this fellow that I just discovered, and he's Zen Buddhist, which I actually don't know a whole lot about, other than that I know how to sit Zazen, but I don't really know anything about the philosophy. But I really like what he has to say. And he was talking on a recent drop about how painful and kind of thorny and radical sexual misconduct in a Sangha community is. And he was talking about how, because I know he had spent time as a monk in a Zen monastery, I believe, and he was talking about his own experiences, in a leadership position, about how different people reacted to it. Some would deny that it caused harm, deny that it, that it was causing harm to another. Even, he said, even when presented with someone right in front of them saying, you caused me a tremendous amount of harm, right? So there was denial. There was, minimizing it. right? Like, okay, well, yes, that happened. And yes, it was not skillful. And yes, it was harmful, but it's not that important. If you were a good Buddhist, then you would lean in, say yes to everything, right? It's all good. It's all part of the practice, right? So the mind is really quite clever at rationalizing anything. Don't believe me? Maybe you need to go read a couple books about the Holocaust. Don't think that could happen to you? Think again. So, again, going back to earlier sections, the importance of having that admirable friend, or, again, he talked about the two supplementary factors, an admirable friend voice, another voice. So right now, I'm Sangaless, and I'm Sangaless because many, many years ago, I want to say maybe 7 or 8, I know it was pre-COVID. Everything since COVID just feels quite surreal, but I know it was pre-COVID. And that happened in the community that I was in, sexual misconduct. And just as this YouTuber said, it was sad. It was sad to kind of watch it all play out. Yeah. And I felt kind of disillusioned after that. Disillusioned, I think mostly, well, a couple things. And I think this is why this book club has been so helpful for me. Again, this is kind of turned into an N=1 experiment. But I'm getting a lot out of it, Yeah, I'm definitely getting a lot out of it, and just kind of seeing how. So some of my disillusionment and kind of drifting away from that Sangha and not really joining another, is that there was some kind of big decisions that I had made. And I didn't want to settle into a new community until I had more sort of clarity, if you will, around where I wanted to be and what I wanted to be doing to be of service on the next half of my life, because I'm half done at least. That's if I'm super lucky or not, right? Depends, I guess. So having an admirable friend is really important. And again, a forerunner. And I did have a lot of admirable friends, so many, throughout really critical times in my life. Admirable friendship via Buddhism, straight up just Sanghas that I belong to, communities that I belong to. I'm a little bit of a wanderlust, I never really stayed anywhere very long, but I got great value from sitting in community and just appreciating, that we really all are in this together. Some have a lot more to contend with than others. And again, if you're Buddhist, then you see that it's all fabrication, and so. What can we do, and what are we going to do? But yeah, it's important to have it. It's important to have it. And I'm going to see if I can try to find this quote. It's a great quote. It's actually a quote that I learned in a 12-step program for food. That's the program that I was in, and I can't remember who said it, but it was something along the lines of, you can't expect to fix your mind with the same mind that produced your, monkey mind? I don't know, whatever. I'm completely destroying the saying. I'll find it. But I think that's, our mind, if we're unhappy, if we're suffering, and again, remember in Buddhism, it's not so much that life, it's our reaction to life is what produces suffering in our mind, would be a more kind of accurate description, because that we actually do have considerable control over. Probably not in the beginning, most definitely not in the beginning, but you can cultivate it. I feel like I'm going off the rails. I'm going to keep reading. All right. So Sutta 36. All right. And it begins with the word heedfulness as a subheading. Just as the footprints of all legged animals are encompassed by the footprint of the elephant, and the elephant's footprint is reckoned the foremost among them in terms of size, in the same way, All skillful Dhammas are rooted in heedfulness, converge in heedfulness, and heedfulness is reckoned the foremost among them. Wow. Okay, and that's AN 10:15. Just another delicious kind of metaphor here, and doesn't that make sense, right? It's almost like heedfulness. Meditation practice in Buddhism is really a training in heedfulness, discernment, vis-a-vis training in concentration, but also training in right mindfulness, and again, we haven't really got into the rites yet, but there's a lot going on, right, in the Eightfold Path. Heedful, heed, to pay attention to listening and personal growth, right? Great Nora Ephron saying, not just neutral, heedful. And so it's, sometimes we'll see in the Discord server, people will ask about, how can I bring it off the mat? How can I bring my practice off the mat? Off the mat. In other words, okay, so I've been meditating for a while. I've been trying some different things. I've been learning on YouTube, or I have teachers. Again, the beauty of this Discord server is people are all over the world. Some who definitely know much more about Buddhism than I do because they actually live somewhere in the eastern side of the planet, right? But so they feel like they're making, I don't like the word progress. That's a little, wah in Buddhism again, but they are seeing for themselves as Buddha promised, right? Just see for yourself. Just see for yourself. See for yourself. Just see for yourself. Do it. See for yourself. And then we'll become, where the rubber meets the road. Okay, great. How do I now bring it from my practice to the real world? And I just heard the greatest talk that I dropped in. Thank you again, Nathan, and Meditation My moderators for letting me maintain my thread. And again, maybe that's just a function of Discord, in which case, Discord, you're amazing. But I dropped a video there, and it's just so exactly what I'm doing a terrible job of right now. Because we don't have as much free will as we think we do after a fashion. And that's why we have to train. That's why you have to train. And so we train and we train and we train. And really, again, I think I've mentioned in the past that I think usually when you meet someone who says, and again, labels, right? But again, usually if you ever meet somebody who says, yeah, I'm into Buddhism or I practice, they usually meditate every day. Yeah, that's just kind of part of it. Like if you were let's say you were a physical fitness, like a weightlifting coach. Well, I would imagine that a weightlifting coach probably has a pretty rigorous routine, or maybe not rigorous. I don't know enough about weightlifting to know if rigorous is even appropriate to use in this particular context, but I think you catch my drift, right? So if you start to do that, then what happens in cultivating that, like playing an instrument, right? That as you practice those scales, you practice the scales, scales, drill, right? Multiplication tables, right? I don't know about you, but flashcards, anyone? So, you practice this and then it becomes easier to be heedful. And listen to what he says here in Sutta 36. Just as the footprints of all legged animals are encompassed by the footprint of the elephant. Wow! Right? In the same way, all skillful Dhammas are rooted in heedfulness, right? And again, I left out a little phrase there, but you just heard me say it. So that really levels it up, doesn't it? The critical nature of heedfulness and why it's so important to train the mind. To train the mind. Yeah. So Sutta 37, heedfulness, the path to the deathless. Heedfulness, the path to death. The heedful do not die. The heedless are as if already dead. Knowing this as a true distinction, those wise in heedfulness rejoice in heedfulness, enjoying the range of the noble ones. So I'm way out of my depth here. And I'm learning these suttas and how to say them. I'm not a scholar again. So I'm just going to say DHP. I know that's a big sutta. And the same author also has a book about this particular sutta, but this was 21 through 22. The path to the deathless. Yes. So, in training in the mind, training in the mind, moving through the jhanas, training in the mind, to the state of unbinding or the unfabricated state. And then moving beyond the life, the cycle of samsara, right? Moving beyond. And that's where I get way out of my realm and don't know how to talk about it. So I'll just say that I have a textbook understanding of the idea of karma and this capacity and this idea of the deathless state, of no longer being kind of caught up in the wheel, the awakening, right? The kind of awakening to the unfabricated state, the oneness, the allness, the oneness, whatever, the thing that we cannot know, the thing that we cannot name, the thing that some religions won't name because they find it too sacred to even give it a name, right? So whatever, we don't know, whatever, right? So here, wow, all I know about this is that I am definitely not awake. I still, as you hear me say throughout this podcast, I still have my shadows, right? Again, Jung, I notice, is popular in the Meditation Mind Discord server, right? So I definitely have done a lot of work on my shadows. I've come a long way, baby. You should have seen the other guy. No, seriously, though. I've come a long way, but I still, I was talking about this earlier today, that I liken it to, so trauma in the body, right? There's a book that's called The Body Keeps the Score. And I love that because to me, there is nothing that is more kind of crystalline in clarity than the title of that book in relationship to the embodied state. The body keeps the score. So we were talking about this a little bit today, that and again, everybody's different, right? And again, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. That's a horrible expression. I'm not even going to say that. Again, see earlier sections, see the fabricated mind, see all of that, right? So we all have luggage. Some of us have carry-on luggage. Some of us, it's like we've been traveling the world for 6 years straight and decided not to whittle it down before we got on the plane, right? So we all have lots and lots of luggage, some more than others. So it's a really good idea to kind of know that coming right out of the gate. So unless, heedfulness, it doesn't say heedfulness guarantees the deathless. It says heedfulness is the path to the deathless, right? So, well, the first thing that I have to know, and that that I didn't know right away, and that again, see earlier story in previous episodes, I kind of had to know what my behaviors were. How was I playing out past narratives that were a part of my conditioned, fabricated, right, mind, right? So we all have that. We've talked about that. So we kind of have to know about that, right? So this is the path to the deathless, right? I can be heedful. We're talking about this today. So I know what my trigger points are, which quite honestly happens quite a bit. What I mean by triggered is there's something going on in my environment, something I heard, something I smelled, something I saw, something I felt, a feeling state, right? Or, again, this getting into the aggregates, getting into the form. And I didn't like it. Yeah, right? Aversion. Aversion. No, nope. Right? And as you practice heedfulness, right? And heedfulness comes from working with the kinds of meditation, that Buddha talks about, right concentration, right mindfulness, right effort, well, then you start to notice heedlessness, the path to death. The heedful do not die. The heedless are as if already dead. So Sutta 38, there are these 5 facts that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. Which 5? I am subject to aging, have not gone beyond aging. This is the first fact that one should reflect on often. I am subject to illness, have not gone beyond illness. And I am subject to death, have not gone beyond death. I will grow different, separate from all that is dear and appealing to me. I am the owner of my actions, karma, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related through my actions, and have my actions as my arbitrator. Whatever I do, for good or for evil, to that will I fall heir. These are the 5 facts that one should reflect on often, whether one is a woman or a man, lay or ordained. Well, first of all, I just have to say, how fantastic is it that 2,500 years ago, once again, the Buddha makes it clear that this isn't just a man's game. It's not just men who can have liberation, engage in this training of the mind and see the benefits for themselves, but so can women. And so once again, he invites women into the conversation, which is so nice to see here. Wow, again, this first stanza, depending on how old you are, if you're young, this will theoretically maybe make sense. Going back to the idea of urgency, how urgent it feels. Well, it may not feel particularly urgent, if you're in your 20s, or 30s, or maybe even 40s. But, as you age and as you get older, it becomes more urgent. Remember that idea of urgency in Buddhism? Urgency, urgency, urgency. So I am subject to illness. I have not gone beyond illness. So again, I'm in my 50s, TMI, but I'm in menopause. My body is changing radically. Myriad things going on, both psychologically, knowing that I can no longer have children, right? And I'm also seeing that my body's not beyond illness. Now, I'm really quite lucky from my view because I'm in my 50s and just dealing with this right now. But I've met and talked to people who grapple with cancer, leukemia at a very young age. Maybe they were born missing limbs. Maybe they're low sight, or they don't have vision at all. Or maybe there's something else going on there that makes life profoundly difficult. Illness, physical illness, mental illness, unwellness. And just like meditation, we don't really appreciate it until we experience it for ourselves. But if you can remember, if you can train, right? Go back and look at the first sentence in the there are these 5 facts that one should reflect on often. You're going to get sick. Maybe you haven't gotten sick yet. Maybe you're not sick today. But you will get sick. And maybe you yourself won't get sick. Maybe somehow you'll dodge that particular bullet. But someone you love will absolutely get sick. And you will die. That one you definitely can't get out of. We haven't figured that one out yet, at least not to my knowledge. I am subject to death, have not gone beyond death. So again, in earlier sections, talk about how we meditate on our death. Sometimes you can even find retreats, whole retreats that are dedicated to contemplating, once again, going back to this idea of the disgustingness of our body, right? Even last week when I was reading, right, and how descriptive it was. Oh my gosh, when he's describing, how his ascetic life and how his skin was rotting and falling off. And it was just like, And, I have to assume that once again, because he's not typically really hyperbolic like that, I have to assume again, it's kind of for to put an exclamation point on it. Meditate on that. No, really meditate on that. Sometimes I look in the mirror and I just really study all the lines in my face, the shadows, the bags, the wrinkles, the spots, the sunspots. Put my hand on my chest. Yeah, I am subject to death. I have not gone beyond death. I'm going to die. That's going to happen. It's going to happen. Make friends with it, right? I will grow different, separate from all that is dear and appealing to me. Yes. This is when I wish I had a teacher. But I think that this third one is kind of it's almost like an emotional response to the first two, but I don't have a teacher to straighten me out. In other words, to me, there's two ways that he could have meant this to my mind. One, as you do this practice, you do feel a little bit of I don't like the word separation, but you do feel a little bit separate, but not in a bad way. It's kind of hard to explain. Now, I don't know if that's what is meant, but I have a funny feeling probably not, actually. The only other thing I can think of that it might mean is as we age and as we die, we grow different. And we separate from the things that we care about, right? They die around us. Someday, I chose not to have children. It was actually a choice largely coming from my Buddhism. No judgment on people who had children. Not at all. Not at all. Just saying what I did. And yeah, that means that, someday, I'm going to be really probably, maybe, possibly ill, but I'm definitely going to be old and decrepit and my flesh is going to be bagging and sagging and I won't be able to wash myself. That is possible. I've definitely treated my vessel pretty good, or tried to, but my body. So I'm not sure which of those, or maybe it means something else. I'm not sure. So I love this, obviously, if you've heard my previous episodes. I'm the owner of my actions. Yeah. Heir to my actions. So you have an action, guess what? It's on you. It's coming down on you. And so this again is a really kind of critical and nuanced aspect of Buddhism that kind of gets into this idea of suffering. Part of the suffering that humans create for themselves is that we don't recognize that we are the owner of our actions, that we are the heir to our actions, that are that are born of that. What happens to us is born of my actions and related through my actions. Now, where this could get really hard for a lot of people and also for myself. And to this day, in fact, I just commented on something, that where it was like, and I understood what he was getting at. I really did. It's just that I think that you need to be a little bit careful on YouTube when you kind of flippantly say things like, just say yes to everything. Right. Yeah. Don't be telling women that they should just say yes to getting raped. Yeah, just use it as a form of practice. So I realize that, the reincarnation stuff can be hard for the West. And this idea that we chose our physical form and our experience. And I don't know. And in a way, in Buddhism, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Okay. So according to Hinduism and Buddhism, right, on a certain level, and you'll even hear this from the law of attraction, on a certain level, there's this kind of like overarching, really esoteric, way not accessible idea that we attract everything that we experience. But if you were to follow that logic all the way to its bitter, bitter end, right, then you get into things like, well, does that mean that the Jews attracted the Holocaust? Does that mean that people who are dying of starvation right now in various parts of the world, they attracted that? Does that mean that a little 5-year-old child who's actively being abused attracted that? Right? So you can see how that's not going to be a very popular view for a lot of people. And I reserve the right to say, I don't fucking know, right there. Because again, I'm very practical and pragmatic. I understand that Buddhism, its tenet is faith, deep, deep, profound faith in the idea of reincarnation. And again, I told you in previous episodes some interesting experiences that I had with hypnotherapy. I'm open. I choose to have beginner's mind and just to say, I don't know. And I'm totally okay with not knowing. I really don't need to know. I promise. I just don't need to know. I'm more interested in strategizing. I try to stay away from things like, if your life is hard, it's because, you chose that in this life, right? Because just think about it if you're in their shoes, right? Even if they get what you're saying theoretically, they're going to be like, right on, man. Well, meanwhile, I can't pay my rent. So what? Right? So on a certain level, it just doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. So why are we talking about it? It's like time better spent. Time better spent not pontificating on things that we actually really don't know for certain. This is why I don't have comments on my podcast, right? Because but I would argue that even if believing in the cosmic reincarnation, which, if I'm really honest, I don't know, but I really am open. Again, just because I've had some trippy things happen, that I'm like, okay, well, can't explain that, but so I'm open. But I've also seen for myself, through meditation, again, through the practice, and as you practice, it becomes more and more subtle. You start to kind of see more and more subtle aspects of the mind. And I think that this is true, especially, again, remember that I came from a lot of therapy. So I was working with a therapist who was really kind of helping me to get in there. I was also working in a 12-step program, which asks you to do something called a 4th step inventory, which is basically like you're journaling about answering all these questions about yourself and the choices that you make and what drives you and why do you behave that way and when's the last time you did this and what happens when this happens. And so I had a lot of other things, that was kind of helping me to get in there and see how I was creating, and I was the owner of my karma, that I was the heir of my karma, that I didn't realize that I was the owner of my karma. I didn't realize that I was behaving in such a way, a habituated state of response, most likely to my, again, very kind of disruptive, very weird childhood that was just weird and just fucking weird, and so I developed, right, some compensations and overcompensations, right, so that I could survive. And that's what we all do, right? Humans are very adaptable, and our mind will look for ways to survive, even to the degree that it will split off into other personalities just to survive a home life that's so awful that it's not even tenable. And so the mind, what does psychology learn? Psychiatry learn, the mind can split off to protect itself, to survive. Right? So really incredible. Anyway, I'm going off on the crazy shows this week. I got 15 minutes left. Let's get on with it. Now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect? That I am subject to aging, have not gone beyond aging? There are beings who are intoxicated with a typical youth's intoxication with youth. Because of that intoxication with youth, they conduct themselves in a bad way in body, in speech, and in mind. But when they often reflect on that fact, that youth's intoxication with youth will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. Right? So I love that, right? If they shine a little bit of a light on it, well, it reveals itself. It reveals itself to the seeker. Grows weaker. Ooh, I made a rhyme. You're welcome. Now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect? That I am subject to illness, have not gone beyond illness? There are beings who are intoxicated with a typical healthy person's intoxication with health. Because of that intoxication with health, they conduct themselves in a bad way in body, in speech, and in mind. But when they often reflect on that fact, that healthy person's intoxication with health will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. And again, I love this, and I can't speak for you and how you learn things, but, for me, so often, how I really learn things, in other words, the way that the Buddha is describing that we learn things, like really feel it, is to be forced to, kicking and screaming. That's how, kicking and screaming, right? I was this person intoxicated on my health. I was a distance runner. I did that for a couple decades. I ran several races a year. It was a huge part of my life. It was a really primary way for me to regulate my emotions, and I was identified with it. Didn't realize how much I was identified with it until I couldn't run anymore, and was faced with this right here, right? And so now here I am reflecting on it, and yeah. But of course, it's also the pain in my body that's also kind of letting me know, hey. And, my intoxication with my youth, not being smart about how I ran, not always stretching, not always doing all the things that, we kind of understand we should be doing now. I probably, it could have been different. Who knows, right? Who knows? Okay. Anyway, moving on. Now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect that I am subject to death, have not gone beyond death? Well, there are beings who are intoxicated with the typical living person's intoxication with life. Because of that intoxication with life, they conduct themselves in a bad way in body, in speech, and in mind. But when they often reflect on that fact, that living person's intoxication with life will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. And again, this is where I would really need a teacher. And I think that, there may very well be some real differences here between this and maybe like Hinduism, for instance. I'm not sure. I would need to know more about Hinduism. But, the Buddha is really clear here that, the aim is not to be intoxicated by life. The aim is not to get completely taken out and caught up in the passions. This is not to say that you don't get excited, and that you don't use that wonderful energy or even create it in the body. I mean, a big part, you can. But it's more about, notice the word that's being used here, intoxication. There's a neediness there. There's a clinging there. There's an enslavement relationship to an object there. Right? I'm intoxicated. In other words, I'm no longer thinking straight. I'm no longer, and I get it. I get it that this goes against many, many philosophies, and I'm not trying to change any minds, at all. At all. Just kind of noting, that this is the middle way. So kind of get into a conversation with someone about hedonism. And normally when I think of hedonism, I think of someone who's just like, blah, just eating, having sex with, spending, having, getting, everything, all the things, right? Just grab, consume. It's more of like, so, but I think what this person meant was, yeah, it's okay to just, go a little crazy. Yeah, I for one don't really live by that adage, but I certainly have no judgment against it. Everybody's gotta do their own way, man. Far be it from me to yeah. So now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect that I will grow different, separate from all that is dear and appealing to me? There are beings who feel desire and passion for the things they find dear and appealing. Because of that passion, they conduct themselves in a bad way in body, in speech, and in mind. But when they often reflect on that fact, that desire and passion for the things they find dear and appealing will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. And again, this makes it, I realize how easily one could read this and think, oh, Buddhism is awful. Buddhism is trying to create a condition wherein you just are, you feel nothing, you feel apathy, you feel removed from Homo sapien. And that's not my experience of Buddhism. I think what is being got at here. So I talked about this in an earlier section, and I can't remember exactly where it was in the book. Sometimes we can have so much desire and passion for someone. And so the analogy that I used in that episode was, let's say it's our child. And we love them fiercely, fierce passion, fierce passion, just unbelievable, fierce passion. That's beautiful. I mean, I think that I feel so lucky to be a human, to have access. I mean, oh my gosh, we're such emotional beings. It's quite remarkable how many emotions that we're capable of experiencing, you know. But that passion can become a veil over our eyes that lies, that blocks out discernment and blocks out real compassion. And so the analogy that I had used is, you know, let's say that your kid's a drug addict, right? And sometimes when you go to, there's a program called Al-Anon, and this is for people who are married to, you know, parents, their kids, whatever, are alcoholics. But you also see a lot of people going there who have parents who are drug addicts or other things, right? One of the things that you hear about in that program a lot as people are working their steps and they're working that program is that if you really, you know, your helping isn't helping. So who's your helping really helping? You and your ego because of your passion, right? You're clinging. Well, is that really helping them though? I thought you said you love them. So what's it going to be? It's that radical, right? That radical edge in Buddhism again. Really, really radical. Really, really radical. It's not for everyone. Now, based on what line of reasoning should one often reflect that I am the owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related through my actions, and have my actions as my arbitrator? Whatever I do, for good or for evil, to that will I fall heir? There are beings who conduct themselves in a bad way in body, in speech, and in mind. But when they often reflect on that fact, that bad conduct in body, speech, and mind will either be entirely abandoned or grow weaker. And I love this. And it also kind of gets to what I said earlier. And again, this is when I would love to have a guide, an admirable friend, someone who really knows these teachings. It requires radical truthfulness. You know, going back to earlier sections, I mean, it really does require you to really acknowledge what the bad behavior was, to acknowledge what the harmful thing is that you said, to acknowledge it, right? To acknowledge it. Maybe they notice that they have a mental thought pattern that's not helping them. Recently, I was challenging someone that I was talking to, just maybe getting kind of, just gently kind of encouraging them to maybe think about something in a different way. There was just kind of a mental habit they seemed to have just because I had been hearing them talk for a while and had heard had become a refrain. This kind of general sense of worthlessness, unworthiness, which just breaks my heart and probably comes from their conditioned experience, right? But now there's a pattern that's been laid down. But what if you could think about that thought, that habituated refrain, you're a piece of shit, you've got nothing to offer, one interesting thing to do to start working with that is to ask whose voice is it. And this is where, finding therapy. There's all kinds of therapy out there. Some's very embodied, which is what I needed. Others is more cognitive, but this idea, that our thoughts, it's a good idea to become really cognizant of what our thoughts are, right? Because we can also not be skillful in that. My argument, my challenge to this person was, could you think of that belief that you have about yourself as an unskillful thought that you have, and that regardless of where it came from, you have the power to change the song. Now, this isn't going to be easy. I mean, no. Hell no, man. Are you kidding? Conditioning is called conditioning for a reason. Right? That refrain's been playing over and over and over again, right? It's conditioned. But with practice and patience and self-compassion, you can begin to shift it. And one thing that Buddhism might suggest that isn't always going to be popular, especially over here in the West, is what if you started looking at the story that we might have about being a victim? I was a victim of child abuse. I was a victim of... But looking at that and asking ourselves, is that helpful? What is it giving me? Right? And so these are the kinds of things that I think are being got at here, right? Our behavior's bad, right? How we behave with our body, right? Our speech, what we say is bad. But often that follows what's in our mind, right? That's just further down the line, right? So what's going on there with the mind and habits of thought? Can't believe what time it is. Wow. I got to like 3 pages. Now, a disciple of the Noble One considers this: I am not the only one subject to aging, who has not gone beyond aging. To the extent that there are beings past and future, passing away and re-arising, all beings are subject to aging. There it is. Have not gone beyond aging. When she often reflects on this, the path takes birth. She sticks with that path, develops it, cultivates it. As she sticks with that path, develops it, and cultivates it, the fetters are abandoned, the obsessions destroyed. Wow. Again, big bow to you, Buddha, for including us chicks in your teachings 2,500 years ago. That's right, ladies and gentlemen. Well, this is just something that you're going to hear Buddha say over and over and over again, just stick with the damn path. Just stay on the path, man. I mean, you don't have to, but if you want to experience liberation, just stay on the path. It's interesting, I think, especially, again, I grew up in the West, and given my background, this idea of having someone say to me, do this, right? I think what I love about Buddhism is Buddha never actually says, hey, do this, like you should do this. He never actually says that, ever. He just says, hey, this is what I did and this is what I got. And I suspect if you do this, you're gonna see this too. Because I've seen this happen with my students, like a lot of them. So I'm guessing this could happen for you too, if you've got these qualities, that we've already talked about. So good stuff. And further, a disciple of the Noble Ones considers this: I am not the only one subject to illness, who has not gone beyond illness. I am not the only one subject to death, who has not gone beyond death. I am not the only one who will grow different, separate from all that is dear and appealing to me. And further, a disciple of the Noble Ones considers this: I am not the only one who is owner of my actions, heir to my actions, born of my actions, related through my actions, who has my actions as my arbitrator, who, whatever I do for good or for evil, to that will I fall heir. To the extent that there are beings, past and future, passing away and re-arising, all beings are owner of their actions, heir to their actions, born of their actions, related through their actions, and have their actions as their arbitrator. Whatever they do for good or for evil, to what will they fall heir? When she often reflects on this, the path takes birth. He or she sticks with that path, develops it, cultivates it. As he or she sticks with that path, develops it, and cultivates it, the fetters are abandoned, the obsessions destroyed. Well, just commenting on the first part of this last section. Well, this is actually what can really, I think, help drive a metta practice. And so in Buddhism, this idea of metta, and yeah, you may already know about it, or you can certainly look it up and find out all kinds of information about it. But really, the heart of the matter really is the heart. It's this idea of cultivating compassion for yourself, for people you care about, for people you've never met, and for people that you don't like, people that you maybe experience a lot of aversion towards. And this can go pretty far, pretty fast, pretty radical, pretty deep. If you really stick with it, you really cultivate that metta practice and include it in your regular practice. But I think this last section here really kind of gets to, well, how can we cultivate compassion? And again, you've heard me talk a lot again, right, about how I work with, my fabricated mind. And I find this particular sentiment in Buddhism very, very helpful. In those moments when I feel triggered and my pattern conditioning arises, right? Mistrust, suspicion, all the things that helped me when I was younger but don't serve me now. And so what can I do? How can I bring in my practice to help me open my heart? Well, there's physical things I can do with my body, like I do Kundalini, and there's things that you can do. Yeah, again, I don't want to get out of my depth. I'm not a yogi. Okay. There's lots of different ways and things that someone can do to maybe kind of help, including breath work, just generally speaking. Again, I'm not an expert in any of this. So just, do what you need to do for yourself. But in Buddhism, the idea of metta, right, of actually producing thought in the mind and kind of holding it, being with it, kind of, may I be happy, right? May I be free from suffering. Getting to the people that we don't know, right? And maybe getting to the people that are hard. So I think I mentioned in past episodes that I very, very often will hold people that I am afraid of. I will do meditation specifically for them. In other words, I'll bring their face to mind while I'm meditating, and then I'll deliberately cultivate love for them, sending them happiness, hoping that they can be free of their own samsara, their own suffering, right? Because it says right here, everybody else is dealing with this crap too. We're all trapped in the cycle of samsara. And again, going back to earlier sections about the 7 chariots, right? The different entry points, the different. And if we can remember that it's all fabrication, then can that help us to produce empathy? Because to me, metta is an empathy cultivating practice. So when I bring Trump in, which I do often, especially lately, I know a little bit about how he grew up. I know a little bit about his fabricated conditioning. Can I see that he's human? Can I see, right? And again, this is no judgment of Trump. I'm not doing this
as some weird way of signaling to Trump, who I'll never meet and doesn't know that I exist, that it has nothing to do. It really has nothing to do with the people that were holding metaphor after a fashion. This sounds really radical, I realize. It's an exercise in opening your own heart. That's it. The task is for you to open your heart unconditionally. This doesn't mean that you have to accept bad behavior. It doesn't mean you have to stay in abusive relationships. It doesn't mean that you have to stay. Period. You don't have to do anything. But here's Buddha suggesting, right? He's suggesting, hey, maybe if we think about this, if we contemplate this, what you will notice, and I certainly find it 100% true for myself in ways that I can't even begin to convey, and quite frankly are a little too personal to share with complete strangers. But I'll just say that this sentiment, this idea of opening the heart for everybody, even the people, especially the people that we quote unquote hate the most, can be a radical life changer for the better. At least it has been for me in ways that I, quite frankly, never would have thought possible for me when I started on this path 25, whatever, years ago. So I am at time. And that was the end of the sutta too. So there we go. And if you're listening, I appreciate it. And I hope that you were able to get something from this today that can be useful for you in your own practice. And if you practice them, whatever they are for you, happy holidays and take great care.